Hello, everybody. Welcome to Transformation Weight Control podcast. This is season 2, episode 7. Our
Correct.
18th guest, Naomi, who I am going to introduce formally in just one moment. But first, introduce Alex Tashinsky, the guy who makes
Hello,
this whole.
everyone.
That's right. Hello, everyone. And he makes this happen, as I was telling Naomi before we started. If it weren't for Alex, none of this would happen because it took me 6 months to learn how to use Zoom. So listen, you can click away if you like, but if you do, what I'm telling you is that you are going to miss the truth about what it is like to live with this chronic disease of obesity and what it is like to take a GLP-1, which you've heard of, and how that fits into your life and how it rounds out your life and alters your life. And you're going to hear it from the real thing. So you could tune away if you like, but if you do, I'm telling you that you're not going to find the same thing on social media anywhere else. So stick with us. I've been doing this 45 years. Our guest is fantastic, and wait till you hear her. Very smart, articulate, has been through it, and is going to enlighten you as to what's going on in this world of chronic disease of obesity. All right, so welcome everybody. Our guest is Naomi. She does have her last name, so I'll say it, Naomi Boak. And I have known Naomi, I think when President Lincoln was in office, I think
Yes,
is when I
it
met.
was
I think
right
so, yeah.
during the
So
Civil War.
I've
Yeah.
known Naomi really a long time, and she's lovely and wonderful. And she is part of Transformation Weight Control, our program I started, and she is part of the weight loss medication support group that I started 20 months ago. And I started it because people were asking me questions who were taking these GLPs that sounded like they'd had weight loss surgery. They were asking about, what do I do when I'm full and I'm not hungry anymore? And everybody was bewildered and unnerved. And I said, really, we need a support group because people don't know. And you probably out there listening to this or watching may have some of the same questions or issues like, what do I do? How do I live with normal appetite regulation? And the objective of our podcast, if you look at some of the others, they're old research colleagues of mine. I did research for 25 years at Obesity Research Center at St. Luke's Hospital in New York City. And so I brought my old colleagues on, and you're going to get the truth here, and no misinformation, no bull. It's like the real thing. So hang out, stick around, enjoy it. All right, Naomi, welcome. Thank you. I will tell people and then give you the floor that Naomi has been in our medication support group for quite some time. They meet weekly, 75 minutes a week. And we got like 24 people in there, and me and a dietitian, and we're running the group and helping support people through this whole life altering identity crisis experience of like getting normal appetite regulation. And that's what we're doing. And we're helping folks. And you're going to hear a lot about that from Naomi. But, I've asked people who want to volunteer to come on as a guest. And Naomi said, me. And one of the things that triggered her wanting to come on was we were talking about the trauma of living with obesity and maybe even growing up with it. Some of you may have been fortunate enough to only experience it from adulthood up forward, but some, you experienced it from youth and living with this chronic disease. And I believe that there is a lot of trauma associated with this, as do many of my colleagues. And I think it's critical that we talk about that and get it out in the open, because if you're carrying this secret around with you, it is going to affect you. There's just no way it can't. Whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, if you have never shared your trauma, then you really have like a PTSD from living with chronic obesity. And we've been doing a lot of that work in our groups now, because the GLPs are like unbelievable. They're life altering. People are losing weight, and suddenly they're discovering different parts of themselves, including the trauma when they were younger. But it's healing. It's healing. It's amazing what I'm watching. in these groups. It's just it brings tears to my eyes sometimes to hear the life alteration that people are going through, the transformation. So Naomi was really turned on by the fact that we were talking about trauma. She's had it and she's going to describe it to you. And we're going to talk about that and then what her life is like since she started a GLP. And was that Naomi's dog or Alex's dog? That
No, that's Pink. So if you hear Barker,
okay,
you
that's
see
not,
some
all right.
brown ears here. That's Pink.
Okay, good. All right. So we've got Alex with 4 dogs and Naomi with one, and okay, it's like a kennel here. And
Yeah, it is a
Mine is
kennel.
resting over there. There's Bella.
Oh yeah. Hi, Bella.
there she is in the background. There she go. That's right. That's great. Alex has a Bella and a Luna, and there's a restaurant right up the street from where I live in New York City called Bella Luna. Anyway, all right, let's get to the topic. Naomi, welcome. Thank you so much. It is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to have you. Would you like to share anything that you would like right now to get us just started? And then we'll get into it. I'll start asking you some questions and we're going to have an informal conversation about your life.
Yeah, well, I think nothing has affected me in my life more than I will say being fat. I know that obesity is a disease, but I talk about it as being fat. And I have had to deal with this disease since I was a little kid, and the trauma and the prejudice and the things that the damage that gets done to yourself and your being and the way you have to traverse the world is so deeply affected by that. Yeah, I'm here to talk about that and about the GLP-1s, which is a whole new world of losing weight for me.
Right. Okay, good. Thanks. All right. Well, then why don't we start with what brought you here to begin with? You've already used some really provocative words: damage, trauma, as I mentioned, traversing the world, how it affected you so deeply. I mean, these are common themes that we hear a lot about. Let me ask you a couple of questions before you just sort of roll on with what the experiences were like. My first question I have for you: did it ever feel like you were a prisoner inside your body at any point?
I don't know if I just was a prisoner, but I think I felt, I'm hearing a little feedback. Um, I felt disconnected from my body. I didn't
Disconnected.
want I didn't want to be connected to this body that I couldn't stand, and that interfered with my life so much. So one of the ways of coping and just going through life was to disconnect from my body.
When that immediately came to your head when I asked you that and you said it wasn't so much what I said but how you disconnected, were you thinking of anything in particular or was that a general statement? Or there, because I'm sure there are certain specific experiences where you felt disconnected, but what came to your mind when you first brought that up? Because it's a powerful word. You disconnected from your body, and then I have a few things to say about it, but what were you thinking?
Well, I mean, so prisoner, the word prisoner made me jump to disconnect. And the disconnect is I hated my body for much of my life. And if you're going to not lock yourself up in a room, which I did for some time, not a long time, but for periods, and move around in the world, you have to disconnect, forget the body that you're living in, because people around you are reminding you in so many
Right,
ways of what that body is and how much disdain they have for your body.
right.
So the only way to survive a lot is to disconnect, which
Well,
also is an obstacle to using your body to get healthy, right?
yeah, yeah. I think you touched the key word. You said survive, and I agree. I think what you experienced just intuitively, adaptively, is survival. This was the only way you could survive, which is to sort of disconnect from the head to the physicality because it was so uncomfortable physically,
Right.
psychically. People, you said, that you used, there was so much disdain. You used that term, and that's, to me, is the stigma, is the bias, is the judgment, is the shame, the blaming, the guilt you experienced, the judgments, the heart. I mean, it's still today not
Oh
any
yeah.
different, really, right?
No.
And
Yeah.
so this is sort of a very primitive survival, what we call bottom up. In brain science, we talk about top down, which is our cognitive abilities, our executive function, thinking from what we call the prefrontal cortex, right? That's top down. It's where we think and make decisions and so forth. The bottom up is the fight or flight, the survival mechanisms, the automatic things we do. If you touch a hot stove, you move your hand immediately. That's fight or flight. It's survival, or
Right.
escaping danger. And so what you're describing is a childhood and into adulthood of surviving 20 constantly. I mean, what is that? Tell us what that's like. What was that like to just constantly live with that all the eyes are on me. I feel shame. I feel like it's my fault. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Can you say a little
Yeah.
more?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. To note that I'm hearing a little feedback. To note that I grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? Came into my real adulthood in the 70s. And at that time, there was no one else that was fat that was around me. I mean, it's just, the percentage of people living with obesity has grown so much in the last 50 years. But when I was coming of age, I had no classmates or friends who were
You did
overweight.
not.
Just no, just me. And so I was an outcast in many ways, although I'm smart. I knew that much. Very social. I think in fifth grade, I got marked down for being a social butterfly, but probably compensating a lot for not being accepted externally. I mean, it was a setup for me because I have had asthma from birth. And at that point in time, if a kid had asthma, especially exercise induced asthma, exercise was not a good thing. And I was allergic to a lot of things that might have been healthier for me to eat. And so it was a setup for me for, whatever my genetics is to get fat.
What do you mean when you say a setup? You mean the environment set you up for the what do you mean when you say that?
That well, I mean, so when I was about 7, I was only a few pounds overweight, right? And the pediatrician told my parents, "You should watch out for this because if she doesn't lose these few pounds now, she's going to have a problem with obesity as she grows up." And so the setup was that my parents were so fearful of my getting an asthma attack from moving my body that I got very little exercise. Okay. And that there were a lot of foods that I couldn't eat that would have been, like a lot of my diet was red meat, high fat foods, because I wasn't allergic to that. So it was a setup for gaining weight,
Got it. Okay,
right?
I understand. Yeah. The sort of technical scientific terminology for what you're describing is what we call the genotype phenotype. Phenotype spelled
Right.
Phenotype. What that means is you have the genes that predispose you to this, and then if the environment is such, then the genes express themselves, we like to say.
Right.
In other words, it worked in combination, and your environment added to it because, lots of food, and then you had asthma and, all these, external things that happened to you that contributed to the phenotype, how the organism looks, which
Right.
is you're sort of describing. And
And
that's a really important thing.
and then the emotional trauma doesn't help, right?
Right. Of
That
course.
being made fun of at school. I mean, I can tell you, gym class was a real pleasure. And I mean, I told you about this, but we used to go, I did ride horses, and we used to go to a horse show in Tennessee in early September. And so on the long drive back home before school, I would feedback again. Sorry. I I would cry the entire way home because I didn't want to go back to school where I knew I was going to be tormented. So that's that, that kind of external view that you absorb about yourself changes who you are.
Right. Yeah, I would say it shapes who you are, not changes
Yeah.
so much, because you're in your formative years. I mean, ages 7 to 11 are really formative years from a psychological point of view. And if you're struggling with exercise-induced asthma and all this and the humiliation of physical education, think about those words, physical education. I mean, how
Right.
many of the listeners out there were physically educated? When I was on the faculty at Columbia University teaching graduate students who are going to go on to medical school, and I'd ask them simple, basic physical education questions like, does your biceps extend or flex? They didn't know that. And these were really smart graduate students because we never were physically educated. I did some research, a lot of research on the gym class experience, and found that every single time I did this research, it was that in order to enjoy it or to have fun at it, you had to be good at it.
Right.
And right. And wasn't that your experience, or being picked last, or could you climb the rope or jump over the pommel horse? I mean,
Oh,
could there
climb
be
a rope.
anything
Oh
less?
my God. Never.
Right. I mean, could there be a more unenlightened experience than what we all suffered through physical education? Right.
Right. Right. It was terrible.
Yeah. And then the first moment that it's not mandatory, what happens? You're out the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So also for me, my weight, I have been able to lose weight a number of times.
There's been a sort of cycle of up and down.
Yeah. So I have experienced being at a kind of quote normal weight, right? Where people aren't looking at me and being judgmental about my looks, right? But so it's a kind of checkered experience, but
Right.
but the experience of being fat sticks with you
Yeah.
as you struggle to keep the weight off.
Right. Right.
Hey,
That's
just
the trauma. That's the scar
Yeah.
that we carry with us. And so, Naomi, I wanted to return to something you said that I think is really important. You, I don't know if you used the word exactly isolation, but you were the only one, you said, growing up in the 60s and so forth. There weren't kids that looked like you necessarily. What was that isolation like for you? Was there anybody who you could even talk to that could understand? What did the isolate? Because I know one of the common hallmark themes of this whole thing is the isolation and the self-loathing. What was the isolation like for you?
Well, there wasn't anyone I could talk to about it, really. Um, and this continued through college, right? I started college at a normal weight, but then I gained all my weight back, and I went to school in California when in the 70s, when everyone's skinny in California in those days. So it was really bad, and I had lots of male friends, no boyfriends. And so that's a form of isolation and self-degradation. It makes you feel like less of a person in a number of ways. I mean, it was interesting. My parents were scientists. I come from a family of scientists, and I actually, at the age of 13, was referred to St. Luke's to Dr. Campbell So I did start to have people to talk to and try and help me, but I didn't have peers to talk to. And I didn't have anyone psychologically to talk to because my scientist father was old school and he didn't believe in psychotherapy. So, I was on my
I
own.
was on my own.
Did he think that you should just be eating less and exercising more? Was he like kind of like that?
He was empathetic, but I don't think he had the solutions, right? So the solutions were scientific ones. We're going to take you to the best metabolic research center in the country, right?
So did you go through the old experiences of these stimulants and phentermine or any ephedra? You did all of that, right? You went to the doctor with your mom and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through it all, right? I mean, didn't do the fen until later. I mean, originally it's just, diet and exercise I have a lot of discipline that I can call upon, and I was very successful at losing weight many times. I did it when I was 16 years old. I did it again in my 20s. In my 20s, I did OptiFast. That was another. My scientific family knew that there was this trial of OptiFast, and I was on 300 calories a day of this formula that was only protein. And in 6 months, I lost like 80 pounds, 90 pounds.
Yep.
And boy, I didn't know how to handle that at all. And I, for the first time in my life, craved carbohydrates. I was never someone who craved carbohydrates. Food was a reward. I liked it. I ate a lot of it, but I wasn't someone who had to have ice cream or had to have, a lot of bread. Got off the fast because I hadn't had carbs in 8 months. I gained it all back in 3 months. And emotionally, the trauma of that was horrific. Speaking of isolation, I hid from all my friends for a year. The people who were most supportive of me, I didn't want them to know that I had gained all the weight back. So I hid. And a friend of mine from California had to search me out. And he finally reached me and said, Naomi, I'm worried about you because I haven't heard from you. I didn't know what had happened. And I was actually hiding from the people who cared about me most, which was a whole other kind of trauma.
Yeah. And isolation for sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and I'm just curious, you mentioned no boyfriends. Was that a function of your own psyche or a physical presence, or men weren't attracted, or what do you think was going on with that?
That was men were not attracted to fat women. I mean, especially in high prestige college in California, where everyone is outdoors and exercising and fit, and like I said, I had a lot of male friends, but no boyfriends. I mean, men loved hanging out with me. I had no boyfriends, and it was just horrific. And I've said this to you before, but a lot of my motivation in times when I've lost weight was about sex.
How do you mean that it was about sex? You mean you
It was
became a
about that I
sexually active?
wanted sex. I wanted sex, and I wanted to be sexually attractive.
Sexually attractive. And
So, so that was a big motivation for losing weight. I did when I was in my, I'd say 30s, late 30s, into my 40s. I was able to pretty much maintain with a range of about 10 to 15 pounds, a kind of basically normal weight. It was a lot of work. And this is when I had met my future husband, and we got married. But then after that, in about 2000, I gained all the weight back. And since then, I've been struggling with my weight, been, up to 220 pounds.
So it's a big taboo to ever talk about sexual activity, and people rarely ever do that. Would you how do you kind of characterize what that part of your life was like when that was happening? Was it only when you had lost weight, or was it when you were heavier as well? Share only what you're comfortable with, of course, but
Yeah,
if you could
no,
just
I don't think when I was really heavy for most of the time, I didn't have a sex life. I just didn't. I was not attractive. It's the culture. It's our culture that fat women are not attractive in our culture. There are cultures where fat women are attractive. But I was in a very, upper middle class and upper class world. I was middle class, but I was, circulating in that kind of world. And those men were not attracted to fat women. So,
right.
and I was smart enough to know that it was very hurtful and very lonely.
I'm very lonely.
One of the ways that I respond to those sorts of comments, Naomi, is I just remember all the time. Like, if I can remember time sitting at a diner and guys in the next booth talking as if they looked like Brad Pitt. Like, they would be talking in the most cruel way about women. And I felt like turning around and saying to them, have any of you guys ever looked in the mirror to see, like, who are you to judge? Guys are, I mean, I'm ashamed. It was just shameful what the judgment that guys got away with that. I mean, I really did feel like saying, have you guys looked in a mirror? Like, look at you guys, But it's true. It's so true what you're saying. And to live with that. And guys got away with it and women couldn't. So I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. I wanted to mention that, I started my career with OptiFast back in the early
Mm.
and it was a time when we knew nothing. We had no idea what we were doing. We were putting people on, 800, 600, and no chewing. And I remember when we would have what we call refeed, and I was like Frankenstein. It was like we'd bring carrots and celery into the room because people hadn't chewed for 16 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it was. And I mean, people would start crying and so you lost a lot of weight, but then you started to have carbohydrate cravings. And the moment that you started to have carbohydrate, you just kept eating them and you not only held fluid, but you gained calories and you gained all your weight back. And that was the experience. And so I can relate. I don't feel ashamed of that, but I will readily admit that we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah. It was a state of the art then. And I tell you, I mean, and the prejudice from the doctors as well who were running the AlphaFast program. So I was on 300 calories a day. Okay. I never cheated once. The only thing I ever had besides AlphaFast was sometimes bouillon because my blood pressure would get too low. So, but I remember, and this, and we know this as people who have lived with obesity, you reach plateaus no matter how little you're eating. And I would come in on a week and I hadn't lost anything. And the skepticism and the cynicism from the doctors was horrific. I mean, they would look, well, okay, what did you do? I was running 3 miles a day, and they had just assumed that I had cheated. And even the word cheat, right?
Cheat, that word cheat. I had even when people say I had a cheat day is such a judgment. I ring the bell when people say that because I know they don't mean it, but to have some self-compassion for yourself, right? Because you buy the stigma, you buy the bias, you believe you cheated. And when you internalize it as I'm a cheater, Well, then what? Your arousal is going to be really high. Your emotions are going to be really high, and you're going to eat. And then you're going to have what we call a secondary disturbance, and you're going to eat again because you ate and it just cycles and it cycles. And I hate that word. You cheated.
Another prejudice that we all face living with obesity is when you walk into a doctor's office. They assume it's your fault, and they assume that you're going to have all these comorbidities. Now, I have been very lucky that I have had very few comorbidities. Probably the only one that I've had is osteoarthritis. And so, there would be all these assumptions, and then they get my blood work back, and they go, "Wow, I wish I had your triglycerides." And and they look at my A1C, and it's like, "Wow." And then it was they'd have to open their minds a little bit to that obesity is a multifaceted and multicolored disease, and the prejudice from the medical community was another one that we had to face. And I'll give you another example of what one had to live through in the 50s and 60s with medicine. And again, I come from a family of really highly educated scientists. So I had in my asthma as a child a delayed reaction. So sometimes I would be exposed to something, and I could have a delayed reaction asthma attack 48 to 72 hours later. So we go to one of the top asthma specialists in New York, and my parents would tell him this. And then the end of the session, he'd basically say, "Well, the reason this is happening is your parents are crazy." And then, 10 years later, it's like, "Oh, yeah, delayed reactions, that's very normal." So with obesity, it's even worse. And I've I've done medical journalism. I did a PBS documentary about being obese. So I've gone to a lot of those scientific meetings, and it's eye opening. So I think about, here I am, a highly educated person in this area, but I still have so much damage from the trauma. And even my husband died when I was 57, and I weighed, over 200 pounds at that point. And I kind of realized that that was the end of my having a partner, because no male my age was going to be interested in someone that fat. And I really have been stuck over 190 pounds for the last 25 years. And I will tell you another silly guy story. Sit at the bar at my club, and there are a bunch of guys down the bar from me in their 60s, and they're talking about all these women. This is the Harvard Club, okay? And all these attractive women, and they're talking about women in their 30s and 40s. And I had the same reaction that you did. Guys, have you looked at yourselves? Really? And they weren't even interested. And looks isn't everything. They weren't even interesting people, right? And that's the other thing is, I can be a jerk. Okay. I know that. I have my really stupid jerky moments, but I also can be a really interesting person, and I can be interested in other people. But that being fat is like wearing a mask over all of that.
If I had a nickel for every time someone came into the room at our program after being at the doctor that day in tears because they were about to step on the scale and the doctor had slid the thing all the way over on the weight before they even stepped on it, or they didn't have a gown that fit, or they didn't have a blood pressure cuff that fit around their arm, or they couldn't fit into the chairs in the waiting area because the chairs had arms. The insensitivity was beyond your wildest dreams, and we would have to pick the pieces up. People would literally be in tears from there.
Yeah.
When I was at the hospital, we're in the Department of Endocrinology, and one of the things that would happen is, because we were a teaching hospital, the medical students would rotate through and they would shadow me for a week. And I think the best thing I ever did was I would take the medical students and put them into the room with 20 people in our program. And I would tell those folks, listen, enlighten this medical student, let them know what your experience was like in the physician's office to enlighten them. And they would. And then those students would come to me later, even though they'd been there for a month of rotation. They say, you know, Rich, this was the best part of the whole rotation, to hear what those patients said. So I'm with you. You know, it's taken a lot to turn the corner a little bit on some of that, but there's still that bias. I wanted to bring up one quick issue. You mentioned, because I do want to return to the trauma a little bit, like where you're at with it now, but
Mm-hmm.
are you familiar with the term barrier weight?
No.
No. So you mentioned that your husband passed and you never got below, you said 200 or 220. I forget what
Yeah, I
you
mean,
said.
below 190.
190. So, you know, there is a phenomenon known as barrier weight, where you reach a weight and you don't go below it, either psychologically, physically. Usually there's something. And, you know, I've looked at barrier weights and tried to figure out, well, is it somebody's birthday? Is it some special number, you know, but it isn't. It's a barrier weight, and it's worthy of examination to figure out sometimes. And we can talk more about this another time. But barrier weight's a real thing for anybody listening at home. If you have ever experienced something like what I'm describing, this barrier weight that you just can't seem to get through that weight, that's normal. And, you know, have compassion for yourself for that and talk to someone who can understand and see what's going on at that point. Because it could be that, you know, suddenly you become very attractive, or something happens. And so it's just something to think about if you're kind of stuck with that thing. Let me ask you quickly, do you think that we've used the term already, chronic disease? You believe obesity is a chronic?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely a chronic disease. I mean, I think that I'm going to give you a segue to the GLP-1s. I think that the not being able to get below 190, going, 190, basically between 200 and 220 pounds. Right now, I'm 164. Thank you. But it was about not being able to diet and lose weight. I mean, I only got down to 190 because I was in your group in 2013, and I went from, 205 to 190. But the ability to diet and exercise in life, right? Life happens. And I couldn't do it. And I will say that love is a good weight loss pill. When I fell in love, I lost 10 pounds without trying. Um, but it's just, I gave up. I gave up, and I just, lived my life, and I decided, I'm not going to ever have another boyfriend, or, and I'm old. I'm 73 now. And so it's a good part of age. You can kind of ignore a lot of things that bothered you in a previous life. But no, I just gave up and just have been living with it. That's all. I mean, I did lose, just for one added point before we get to the GLP-1s, 19, after I had both my hips replaced, which was probably my biggest comorbidity from being overweight. I went to work as a park ranger in a remote park in Alaska, and I lost 30 pounds without trying. I was walking 6 to 8 miles a day. We were in this remote place, so there are no stores. The food, we had to fly our food in and then come in a boat across a glacial lake. So food wasn't much of a deal. And so just without trying, I lost 30 pounds. But really, and then I went up again. C'est la vie.
We're going to get to the GLPs in 1 minute. I want to just finish up with the issue of the trauma, just to understand maybe where you're at with that at this point through your adult life. Maybe you had some counseling, some therapy. Do you feel that you've made any progress in that trauma? Do you feel like you've been able to move past, leave some of it in the past? It stays in the brain, in the wiring, but do you feel that there's been some hope or some change or some way of coping?
That's a complex question. I think that age has helped, right? Expectations and goals have changed, right? When I became a park ranger, the big goal was to be able to be physically fit enough to walk 8 miles a day, right? And at first it was hard, the walk home was all uphill. I lived a mile and a half from my office each way, and there was that. The hatred of my own body did not go away until I started on Zepbound.
Good.
Right, right.
Yep. Okay. Last question about this, and then we will move to that. If you were
Yeah.
speaking to a group of young women, young men experiencing the same sort of trauma that you went through, what would you tell them now? Because I like the idea that, aging has helped you. There is no substitute for that. What would you say to them, those listening now that are identifying completely with everything you're saying? Do you have anything you want to share with them at this point? If not, we can move right on. But do you have anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that aging sucks, but the good part of aging are some of the lessons, and the lessons are opinions that mattered a lot before matter less, and your own opinion matters more. Now, that doesn't mean that you sometimes don't have to fight your own opinions about yourself, but you can learn how to discard the veracity of the opinions of others.
Thanks. That's great. I will finish the comment by just saying that this is something we work on all the time, and we call it a false equivalence, which means that you identify yourself only as your weight and nothing else. And we can help people work through that even at a younger age. And it doesn't mean you have to wait until you're 70 to address some of that trauma. And we're a little more enlightened today as a society, maybe. I have questions about that. But if we can get past that false equivalence where all we do is define ourselves as our weight, then we can feel a little more comfortable with ourselves. Would you agree that that's a fair statement?
Yes, but I would add that I don't think I ever defined myself only by my weight. My weight was an obstacle because I often, in different parts of my life, up and down, thought a lot about some of my attributes, non-weight attributes, non-look attributes. Even when I was at my fattest, when I was in college, I thought I was attractive, but I knew I wasn't attractive to men. So that was the downside. And so I think that even if you're of some of the things about yourself that you like, you can still hate your body and hate yourself in that way about your weight, which, I did until recently.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for being so honest and courageous to share that. It can't be easy all the time. I think you're a very mature woman. You're smart and forthright, and you even told me before anything goes with this podcast. And so
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your honesty because I do hope that young folks listening take away from this something positive that, you can learn to accept yourself even at a younger age and the opinion of others. We're never going to get away from that, but that we can also find our own voice a little bit. We don't have to believe all those other voices that don't help us. And I think that's hopefully a takeaway for people. All right, so let's skip forward. GLPs. My prediction is in 25 years, they will revolutionize medicine more than penicillin or insulin ever did. My observations at this point are
Mm.
knocking me off my chair. What led you to start not even thinking about, but taking it? Maybe let's just go right to there. What was the decision to do it?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about it, and I was in your, medication group for a while before I started. My biggest obstacle in doing it was money. I'm on Social Security, and I, work seasonally, so I don't have a lot of money. So that was a big obstacle for me. Um, but I still, I've come a long way about accepting my life and accepting myself, but I still would get up in the morning and hate my body. Just, don't like looking at it, don't like the way it feels and how I move. And, every season when I try to get into my ranger uniform, it's a trauma. And, I wanted to lose weight. So the price came down enough with Lily Direct that I was able to do it.
So you started. How long ago did you start?
I started 7 months ago, started the end of April.
April. And which medication were you taking?
Zepbound.
Did you start? Is that
Yeah.
about? And how much weight have you lost?
55 pounds.
55 pounds. In 7 months. Congratulations.
Thank you.
55 pounds, it's 4 pounds for every pound you lose off your joints. So you're over 200 pounds less stress on those new hips of yours and everything else. So let's get into this. What is it like to, the essence of these new GLPs, and we don't need to get into all of the biochemistry or anything. If you can keep one thing in mind, it normalizes appetite regulation. This disease is no one's fault. I have been doing this for 45 years. I never met one person who said, Rich, one day I woke up and I just thought, wow, how cool would this be to be addicted to food and to be shamed and blamed and felt guilty. I am going to go out and I'm going to figure out how to have this disease. Yeah, go, right? That is not what happened. It is the neurobiology in your brain, the hormonal imbalances, the genetics. It's multifactorial. This is not a lack of willpower. It is not a lack of self-discipline. It is not a character flaw. It is none of that. You did not decide to do this. And the proof, one of the proofs, I can give you 1,000 of them, but one of them is that here's a molecule that chemists have figured out, because I was never into the medications really. They never, your body, your brain, always figured out a way to defeat it. Not now. The chemists got it. We figured it out. It's working in the reward pathway of your brain, which means the area of your brain where food is really enticing, and it decreases that reward. And then it leaves more food in your stomach before it goes to your intestine where it gets absorbed into your body. So it stays in the stomach, so you stay full longer. And we call that delayed gastric emptying. And that's what it does there. So you're feeling full, less hungry, less cravings, less what we call food noise, right? What is your life like now that this is happening, that you have really achieved or are achieving in the process of normal appetite regulation? Tell us what your life is like.
Yeah, it's very different. It's I'm losing weight without the struggle. Now, I told you I was hating my body, right? But even at the very beginning of this Zep-bound journey, I stopped hating my body because it was natural to not eat too much, and it wasn't a struggle. I remember the first time, early on, when I went to the grocery store and I was going to, go down the aisle to get some, veggies to fill me up, right? To get low calorie stuff to fill me up. And then I realized I don't need to do that. I don't need to get all these low calorie things to fill me up because I get filled. And I have much more freedom about what I can eat because I know that I'm not going to eat more than my body will tolerate. I mean, I've never been an enormous eater, which a lot of people who have lived with obesity their entire lives, they end up not eating that much. If you sit an obese person next to a person who's had what we call normal weight all their lives, I bet the person with normal weight was going to eat a lot more at that meal at that restaurant than the person who's had to live with obesity. So, but all those tricks, I didn't have to rely on those tricks anymore. And so it brings the temperature down. So I wasn't looking at my body and going, yet, even though I hadn't lost that much weight, because I knew that it was going to happen. Right. And you so wisely advised me to weigh myself every day, because that's another big fear, getting on that friggin' scale, because it's going to fluctuate. Right. But I'm learning how to do that. And that's going to take a while. But I've been doing that, and that's been helpful. Now, I will say, as miraculous as this is, it's not a walk in the park, right? There are side effects. There are days, if I'm not eating enough, I'm incredibly fatigued. And so I have to think about that. I mean, sometimes I look in the refrigerator and I just like, I don't know. There's like, I don't know what I want to eat. There's nothing much that I want to eat. And, the gastric side effects, but that is so much easier to tolerate than dieting and having this knowledge of a lifetime of dieting and knowing that I'm going to gain it back again. I mean, for the first time, I've got a big bag full of clothes that are too big on me that I'm going to donate instead of keeping in my closet.
Nice. I like that. You can sell them on the website Real, Real. Just so people know. They'll buy designer clothing from you. Not a lot of money, but they'll get some. I want to bring up an issue that you brought up, which is very important and something we hear and observe a lot, which is that not eating enough and the fatigue. I mean, I had a patient speak with me, and she was falling asleep at work and tired all the time. And when we calculated how many calories she was consuming, it was 300 calories a day.
Mm.
Try starting your car with no gasoline in it. But that's a real issue not to be ignored. And we spend time in our groups teaching people what to eat or how. I mean, it happened just the other week, last week, where someone said, I don't know what to eat. And the beauty of our group is there's 22 people, and they're all in the same situation. They all have lots of ideas and sharing, and it's a wonderful thing. So, but that's really important for people at home to understand that, you know, you need to pay attention. There's this sort of medication bias that drives me crazy, where people blame the medicine for all these things. No, the medicine is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. People need to learn how to manage this disease. We don't cure the disease, but learn how to manage it by using the medications properly. Having 300 calories a day because you've lost interest in food is not managing the medication properly. That is a mistake, and we need to, and we do that. We're really good at this. I mean, there was a paper published in the Annals of Internal Medicine back in April, and it showed 25,000 visits to the emergency room in 2022 and 2023. 25,000. That's from electronic health records. It's probably 5 times that many people. In our program, in the medication support group, for 20 months, no, we've had not one person go to the emergency room, because we're teaching people how to take the thing properly. And, people are going to telemedicine or providers who are busy and not learning those sorts of things. So your point is well taken, paying attention to some of these adverse events like fatigue and so forth. So, and another thing that you reminded me of is, and you said it so nicely, but the confidence you have that you can have what you want. I remember one fellow saying in group, Rich, I saw that piece of chocolate and I knew that I could grab it, eat it, and I was not going to spiral. And a day wasn't going to turn into a week, and week into months, and months into years. And 3 years later, I'm 65 pounds heavier. And I get, what the hell happened? There's no more of that. There's the confidence. Do you experience that? Do you have that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's a process to learn that, right? Because there's a lot of trauma associated with eating calorically dense food and things, we're not supposed to eat, right? Things that are forbidden because, and, but I am able to go out to eat or to get takeout or have calorically dense food and not be afraid of it and not know that the reward is just, I'm not going to eat too much. I mean, I have a nice steak in the refrigerator that I'm thinking about, and steak is one of my favorite foods. I know I can make it, and I'm not going to have more than 3 ounces because it's just not going to happen. I'm not going to want it.
Yeah. This is what's known as normal appetite regulation. I can't tell you how many times in my career, I mean, I've never had a problem with my weight. How many times people have asked me, Rich, what is it like to be normal, in this context? And now they get it. You're describing the way it is, the way that we were really designed, because it's really maladaptive to be the other way. This wouldn't have worked in hunter-gatherer days, wouldn't have been very effective. They wouldn't have been able to go out on the hunt or anything. So now the way you describe this, Naomi, is it just exhilarates me to no end to hear the relief in your voice that you can live this way, feeling comfortable around and maybe even enjoy food, but not be afraid. And I don't know what else. What can you say? It's extraordinary what we're observing.
So it's so interesting because I love food, and food when I'm, been upset or I celebrate, has always been part of that. But also, it's been a horrific experience because I gain weight with it. So it's a love-hate relationship with food. And I don't have that love-hate relationship anymore. It's not, so maybe I had a horrific week 2 weeks ago. Probably the worst week I've had in 15 years. And I wanted food as a reward. So I did. But I could do that because I knew I wasn't going to have the whole thing, right? It was just going to be enough. So it was a normal part of my life. And by the way, I have for many years been a 2 martini girl. I have had one drink since I've started this medication, not because I'm like, I can't do it, just haven't wanted it. Just haven't wanted. And the one drink I had was when I went out to dinner with a friend.
Yeah, it's very well described at this point that the GLPs are having an effect on opioid receptors and the alcohol pathway, and people are reporting consuming less alcohol as a result of taking the GLPs, amongst 1,000 other benefits. I mean, you know me, I have no fear of speaking in public, and I have over 3,000 PowerPoint slides for our medication group at this point, and it grows every week. And the benefits go on in every organ system in our body and so forth. And one of them, though, is what you just hit on, which is that for many people, they lose the drive to have quite as much alcohol as they used to. So it's just another benefit. So do you believe all of this is real?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there are a couple things. I am a big believer in hope. Jane Goodall said it best, which is without hope, we fall into apathy. And what these medications have done for me is give me hope in this part of my life. And do I look forward to being on this for the rest of my life or some other variation of this medication? Not really, but I do, in the sense that the results that I've experienced, I want that for the rest of my life. Right.
So this is a very big, and it's a pet peeve of mine, but this issue of, oh, you're going to have to take it for the rest of your life. Well, there are many chronic diseases in this world, and people take chronic medications for their lives. And it's very important to understand that you're not curing the disease of obesity with these medications. You're managing it the same way someone who has diabetes manages their diabetes. There is no cure for diabetes, but you manage it. And blood pressure, many, there's 30 some chronic diseases, whatever it is. So I hear you and the idea, oh, I got to take it forever. But I think when we can finally start to really have the normal conversation that, hey, this really is a chronic disease like all others, because we never have that conversation about people who have diabetes. Oh, you're going to have to take insulin for the rest of your life. I mean, I never hear that. I never heard that. Or, oh my God, I have high blood pressure and there's a medication called lisinopril. I'm going to have to take lisinopril for the rest of my life. I've never heard anybody say that. It's only the weight loss medications, because I believe there is a medication bias, and that bias stems from the societal bias of having obesity. That people think, what's wrong with you? You got a character flaw, there's something wrong. What do you need a medication to lose weight for? Those are people who simply have no idea what this is like. None
Yeah,
whatsoever.
just, eat less, move more. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, right. And, so this makes me absolutely insane when I hear this kind of thing. And as you know, and I've gone on my rants during the groups, which can get amusing, I understand, but I
Yeah.
sometimes cannot control myself. But yes, those are the truths of this. Yeah.
But Rich,
We're winding down here, right? We're running
No,
short
yeah,
on
but
time.
Alex
just
has
real
something
quick.
to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add. I mean, that's a problem with big pharma in general, right? They don't cure anything. Like they much rather that you continue to be sick and take medication for the rest of your life. And to me, that's wrong in general because I do take lisinopril and I don't plan to take it for the rest of my life. I feel like I need another 10, 15 pounds and then maybe I don't need it anymore. I don't know. But that's my biggest gripe. Like we just accept the fact that we're going to be on something for the rest of our life. And I don't like that. They don't work hard enough to cure. They should be doing that instead of just temporary fix.
But I also think that this disease of obesity is so complex. Rich talked about genetic expression and how, that genetic expression morphs over a lifetime. And I mean, I only wish that Zepbound had been around when I was younger, right? Think that it would. I mean, I hate big pharma. Okay, I think big pharma is bad in so many ways, but I think that the other part is we're not supporting basic science at the institutions that do the basic science, and that's where the GLP-1s came from. That's from the academic institutions that have done the basic research. So, but to really cure a complex disease sometimes can be serendipitous, but most of the time it's years and years and years. I mean, the beginnings of this discovery and utilization of these peptides began in the 60s. It took a long time to get to where we are now. So I do fault big pharma for a lot of things. I think for vaccines until COVID have not been very profitable. So there hadn't been a lot of research in that area. But I don't diminish the complexity of a disease like obesity.
Appetite regulation is incredibly complex. I will sometimes, I'm good at taking very complex science and making it simple. But I will, on occasion, just show a very impressive biochemical slide that shows all the pathways just to impress upon people just how complicated it is. It would take me 6 months to teach everything that's on that slide, but I do it only just to show just the complexity of this and then simplify it to the fact that, listen, it's slowing down the food in your stomach and it's taking away the reward of the food in your brain. And that's all you need to know, right? But it is a complex disease, as are other chronic diseases. It's a double-edged sword in a sort of way. But I will say that from one perspective, finally, there's relief. And I've written lots of blogs, and I've finished several of my blogs with the word finally, because finally there is relief. Whether we take it forever or we don't, I don't know yet. We don't know what the future is. The medications are getting better and better. There's a new one will be released probably in 2027 called Maritide. We're only going to have to take it once a month. And I've seen the preliminary data. It already looks really good. Retatrutide is another one. It's 8% better than the best we've got this far. So it's, the chemists are on it, and they're working as hard as they're making it better and better. So I think we have good things to look forward to. Whether, as Alex points out, whether we find a cure, I don't know. Theoretically, it's hard to understand how you would find a cure for something that's so multifactorial. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
I also think that obesity is not one disease. I think it's a complex of diseases. One solution may not work. I mean, even in our group, we hear people for whom the drug works better than for others. My journey with this disease is different than a number of people in the group and a number of people that I've met
We
in my
have
life.
no way to predict who's going to be what we call a high responder or a low responder. We've had people in our group who have been on the lowest dose of a medication, or Zepatide, Zepbound, for 5 months on the lowest dose, and it kept working. And other people, they get 4 weeks and it's hardly working at all. And we don't know who's going to have more side effects and who isn't. But this is typical of all medications, and the bioavailable, how available is it in your body, and how many receptors do you have for GLP? I mean, there's 100 possible explanations, and we don't understand all of that yet. So that's a fair comment, which is some people respond better than others, and we just don't know yet how to.
So I have a question for you, which is we talked a lot about my trauma and the difficult imprints on my life, right? So now that we have these drugs that are helpful, what is being done to address the damage, the psychological damage, the behavioral damage that has been done by this disease and the society that we live in?
Yeah. So number one, I would encourage people to look back in our podcast. I don't know which episode it is, but Dr. Robin Pashby, actually season 2, episode 4, What We Carry. She's brilliant at this, and she has made a career of doing exactly what you're describing right now, which is dealing with the trauma. How do we heal from it? Because I describe it frequently as a blank white sheet of paper with a heavy pencil line. You erase the pencil line, but there's always a remnant. Well, Dr. Pashby is working very hard at helping people heal from that trauma. And it's why I had her on the podcast, and I will have her on again, because she is an expert. So I encourage you to look her up, Pashby, Robin, Robyn, Dr. Robin Pashby, and have a look at our podcast that I did with her.
I did.
And some of the
Yeah, I
other,
did.
yeah. And she's addressing it. It's not, Naomi, it's such a good question. But again, it's like this heavy pencil line on a white sheet of paper, and you erase it and there's still remnants. It takes time. There's no light switch. It's valence. Valence is like a dimmer switch. That's valence. You turn it. And that's what the healing is about. It doesn't, it's decades of trauma, and we can't undo it all at once. I think the GLPs are making, people say to me, Rich, all the things you've taught me over the last 15 years, they're a lot easier now with GLPs. So the physiology is moving faster than the psychology, I think. I mean, as you know, in the support group, we just started a second group for people who are at their final weight, because they don't know what it's like to live what they're calling normal. So we've started that group too, and we're looking at things like identity crisis. We're speaking to people who are having what is classically been known as an identity crisis at the age of 15, at the age of 55 and 60. People are learning how to integrate their lives and put their lives back together. And that's part of the healing. I am so moved by what we're experiencing with this. And that's why we started this new group as well, to deal with that. So to answer your question, not a lot yet, because the physiology is moving much faster than the psychology, but that's almost always the case, right? But if you watch Dr. Pashby, and listen, frankly, I'll just put the plug in. Everybody listening, join our weight loss group. Well, join the medication group, because we're the only one in the country. There's not another one like it. And you'll meet people like Naomi. Everybody's smart. Everybody's been through all the challenges, and we're learning a lot. We're literally talking about identity crisis. I never had those conversations before in our weight loss groups. I've run tens of thousands of groups in my career. And suddenly it's like people are discovering who they are. And I asked a really interesting question. I don't know if you were there in the group that night, but I said, if I had a magic wand and could wave it over everybody and erase all your trauma, how many people would sign up right away to erase it all and forget it all? And not everybody did. Not everybody wants to erase all that, because they see it as part of what shaped who they are. It gave them empathy and so forth. I see that as part of the healing process. I don't see that as some cop out or anything else. It's just part of the healing process. And I think the healing process takes longer because it's more complicated and it's psychological.
Yeah. So I also, this is the television producer in me, I want society to fix itself and to heal. And I have that in my head as wanting to almost get the word out and the lessons out. I will say your group is so helpful, Rich. It's been very helpful for me. But I also think there's so much of society that hasn't changed. And
Listen, the
we're still
societal
living in that
bias,
world.
Naomi, it makes me apoplectic, frankly. And you know it does. And I would do anything that I could possibly do. I immersed myself in social media. I'd never done it before in my life. I find it stupefying. The things that people say and do, and I don't know I'm not a social scientist. I don't know how to answer, how do we address all that bias? I don't know yet how to do it. So I kind of feel like I'm like this little speck on the earth, and I'm doing my part in helping people heal. And it makes me very happy, and it nourishes my soul, frankly, to watch it. And I wish, the reason for the podcast is exactly that, is to reach out. How many are going to view this? I don't know. I told them at the beginning, watch this thing because you're going to learn a lot. And so I think that is part of how we do it. I don't have all the answers for that, though. I don't even think Dr. Pashby does at this point. How do we change society's bias? Gee, that's a tall order. So I don't know yet, but I think you're right. But I think it's going to take generations, and
Yeah.
it's not going to happen overnight. But I'm telling you, every Tuesday night at 6:00, when I come into that room, it's the highlight of my week to watch and listen to you guys, the transformations. I'm glad I called the program Transformation Weight Control, because I was spot on. It's the transformation that you are experiencing. So would we like to extend it to the whole society? Of course. But I don't know how to do that myself personally, but it is thrilling. I really encourage you. I mean, I really hope everybody joins. And I hope I have to put a limit on how many people can join. That's what I hope, because it's just exhilarating to watch. Listen to what you're saying. Listen to the things you're saying. It's extraordinary what's happening. You're putting your life together. It's life altering. I just have never experienced anything like this in my 45 years. I've never seen anything like it. To deal with identity crisis and find that you're not just your weight, and to incorporate other parts of your being into you. It's exciting. It's exciting. It's thrilling.
So as one traverses the world through life in this, fatness, and as you lose it, and because I've experienced both, not this kind of losing process, which is completely different, but it's so interesting to watch how the world treats one in a different body. And I often feel that people who have lived with obesity have a kind of wisdom that others don't, because if they can feel who they really are inside and appreciate the many good things and the positive attributes that they have, they have a wisdom that people who haven't had to deal with this disease will have.
And I think that's the reason why when I said I can wave a magic wand over you and wipe out all your negative memories, people don't want to do it because it gives them the wisdom to define who they are. And I'm with you 110%. I think that's spot on. All right. So listen, we're almost at an hour and a half. It goes by so fast. We could go on for hours. And we'll have you back. That's the answer to that. I have 2 questions remaining.
Okay.
Okay. The first one is there anything else that you would just like to say to the listeners, to our audience, to the people who are watching or just listening? Is there something that we didn't cover or that you want a takeaway, something that people, your wisdom?
A couple of things. I mean, the bottom line, hope. There is hope. I'm very sad that the educational tools are not out there enough to give more people hope. And I think it takes work. Even with these drugs, it takes work. And sometimes people get beaten down so much living with this disease. It's hard to face it. And the financial part. I mean, a lot of people cannot afford this. I'm barely doing it, right? But it's important enough to me that I'm doing other things so that I can. But for me, there's hope, and that to be able to look at the lessons. That's a lesson of age and a lesson of these drugs, I think, combined, that you can have worth and you can acknowledge your worth, and that perhaps more people will acknowledge your worth in the future.
Nice. Very well put. Prophetic, frankly. Good for you. That's wisdom. That's what we call wisdom. All right. So before I ask the final question, I'm going to put the shameless plug in for the Transformation Weight Control program.
Do it.
That I developed. And I truly do believe now that this weight loss medication support group I started is the best thing I have ever done in my career. And I have done a lot of good things in 45 years. But this is knocking my socks off. It's just what it's doing for people and helping people. It's just, and I am not getting rich from this. My soul is getting rich from this. Let me say
Well, you are rich.
Well, I am rich. That is correct. But I want this to spread. So anyway, people can go to our website, transformationweightcontrol.com. You can even set up a free appointment with me, or you can reach me by email. We'll have it in the show notes, rich@transformationweightcontrol.com. I'm happy to speak with you about it. It's an ongoing group. We do it 12 weeks at a time, but you can join at any time you like. It's open enrollment. We'll be starting, we're running right through the holidays, and we'll just continue. So you can join whenever you like. If you have questions about it, email me. I'll be happy to speak with you about it. So please, it would be a privilege to have you join. It's just, and you'll meet people like Naomi. I got 22 or 23 other people just like Naomi, smart, articulate, been through it, get it. And you support each other. You're giving each other ideas. And then we have 2 facilitators who have a lot of experience. We know what we're doing. We can answer the questions. And it's just a beautiful collaboration between the 2 leaders and you all, and then between just all of you. So join us. Come to the website, sign up. I'd love to have you. All right, my final question. Here's the big question. What are you having for dinner?
So before we started this, I was thinking about that steak, but I'm just not hungry now. So I'm really going to have to figure out something. I mean, it may
Naomi,
end up being some yogurt. I don't know.
Naomi, I had early on in the podcast, we had Dr. Marion Nessel on. And for those who don't know who she has been at this for 6 decades. She is a national icon, a national treasure, a food scientist extraordinaire. And she has just come out with her 15th, 16th book, 720 pages. So I asked her what was for dinner, and I was expecting the most profound answer ever. And you know what she said? I'm going to open my freezer and I'm going to look in there and see what's that's how she answered it. And this is like one of the leading food scientists in the world. So your answer is consistent with the leading food scientists in the world. So I hope you enjoy whatever it is you decide to have.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you, and I know Alex feels the same. We want to thank you for participating, for being as courageous as you have to come on and just wear your heart on your sleeve and just let people know what your life has been like. And, it's not always so easy to talk about your own life in front of people. And you do a really good job of it. And I'm very proud of you. It just pleases me to no end that you're experiencing what you are. It really is just so satisfying for my career to have that happen. So thank you very much for
Thank you.
and we will have you back. But
Okay. I think if you had some of us with Robin, it would be good.
Well, we're going to have. I've talked with Robin already about this. We're going to have Renee Rogers, Dr. Renee Rogers, was also on, and she's a wonderful guest. I was thinking we were going to have just sort of like a little coffee thing where we just met and just started talking, and I think we could go on. And then I think your idea about maybe having Dr. Pashby in with some of us, I think is a great idea as well. It's a wonderful idea, and so it's already on the table. And I know she'll be on board with it for sure. So
Great.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that idea. Okay. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And people can find us on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and everywhere Alex does whatever he does. It's like, I'm
Thank
done.
you, Alex.
No problem. Happy to do it.
My work's over, although Alex did teach me how to put it on YouTube. So I do know how to do that. And I've gotten good at it. I used to be a lot of guesswork and I dreaded it. But Alex taught me how, and so I can do that. But Alex does the heavy lifting.
There is hope. There is hope.
There's hope. There's always hope. All right. Thanks again. Good night to everybody. It's 8:30 p.m. Eastern time here on the East Coast of the United States. And we're just finishing up. And again, I want to thank our guest, Naomi Boak, for a terrific podcast. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Night.
Good night, everybody.